Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we will be exploring animal communication. With me is Linda Tellington-Jones, a world-class expert in that field. She is the founder of the Tellington TTouch method. Today, over 2,500 people have been trained in the use of this method on every continent except Antarctica, and she is the author of more than 20 books, including the Tellington TTouch. Welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to be with you once again. And you, as we discussed in a previous interview on Opening to Intuition, you've been working with animals all of your life. And it seems to me that you probably have a natural gift for it because, well, not only were you exposed to animals intimately since childhood, but maybe there are other factors as well. And one of the interesting things that you wrote about in your book is how from time to time you have an experience in which it appears it's as if the animal is communicating to you like in language, that you can have a detailed, involved conversation with an animal.
Well, I would say maybe I have to think about that because my feeling is like animal communication is a really important in this connection with our animals. Yeah. And I was first exposed to it, actually, Jeffrey, by my grandfather, Will Kaywood, whom I did not know until he was 80 years old. That's another whole story. He came to the ranch where my first husband and I had 90 thoroughbred racehorses and 30 Arabian horses. And he had been a racing trainer all those years. And he came to visit us. And he had been a young jockey, a very successful young jockey. When he was 21, he was taken, his agent hired him out to an Austrian racehorse owner, and he actually, I have his passport and or visa and letter. He was taken to Russia to ride these horses of this trainer. And he liked it a lot, and so he stayed on and became a trainer at the Hippodrome in Moscow, where I actually had the amazing synchronicity and pleasure to sit in the same place where he would have watched the races in Moscow. When I was there as a citizen diplomat. And that was 1984 on my first trip there.
I had no idea they had horse racing in Moscow.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. St. Petersburg and Moscow and many other tracks. But my grandfather in 1905 won the prestigious leading trainer award from Tsar Nicholas II, and he had a jeweled cane as a reward.
Oh my.
And he he had 87 winners in that year. Now, what's important in our discussion about that is that he said that his success was due to two factors. Number one, every horse in his stable was rubbed with these short little strokes over the whole body by the grooms. And the grooms still at the racetracks are Russian gypsies. And he said also that he never entered a horse in a race unless it told him they were feeling fit enough to really run well and win. Now that was the first, that's 1960 that he came to us. That's the first I'd even thought about animal communication. And since then I've had, of course, I use it all the time. It's really important.
Now, did you say 1960?
60, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and by then you had already been actively involved, obviously, in the world of horse racing.
We bred horses to race in those. That's we bred yearlings to sell in those for years. That was just before we left that world and started the Pacific Coast Equestrian Research Farm. So anyway, what interests me today is the connection we can have with animals at a heart connection and this intuitive connection. And I don't actually feel like I talk to animals. No, wait a minute. Erase that, Linda. Not true. I actually use the words to talk to animals if I have an intent. For instance, can you please take 2 steps forward? When I'm working with an animal on the ground, I really pay attention to that, because if I speak the words, and I always ask them, thanks to Dr. Emoto's wonderful work, Messages from Water, the concept that if we ask or we command, it's a totally different result. If I, for instance, say to a horse or a dog, or do it, there is no crystalline form in Dr. Emoto's work. If I say, let's do it, can we do that together as an invitation? And I say, please and thank you often, something else happens at the level of communication. It's really different.
Well, you've said something crucial already, because what you're doing is you're throwing out I will call it the obedience paradigm.
Gone. Yes, it's an invitation for us to come from the heart, working together.
And many people, I mean, we talk about obedience training with dogs. It seems that's sort of the dominant model.
It's totally the same with horses. You're going to what's the word? I can't even think of the word.
Show them who's boss.
Show them who's boss. Dominate that horse. And you know what? In this day and age, there's a whole other way of being with our dogs. This thing of commanding and operant conditioning, there's a whole other way of being. And since 1997, I have been working with the concept of Heart Math Institute, and they have done some really beautiful studies. Roland McCrady's son, Josh, actually did something working with his dog and being in heart coherence as measured by Heart Math little M wave, and showing that when we invite, when we are in this place of heart coherence rather than this command dominant position, the dogs and the horses want to be with us. It's a really beautiful study that one of their people also did with horses, showing that when I sit there and I'm in a place of heart coherence, that is thinking pleasant thoughts, that horses who were free and loose in a paddock would come up to them. And when you get in that commanding, dominating way, they would stay away. They can feel it. And I'm also I am a great student and proponent of this concept of the mirror neurons, because how we are feeling affects that animal, and they know it. So for me to come from a place of invitation when I'm connecting or communicating with an animal has a totally different effect. Not just on the animal, Jeffrey, but on me also. Because if your listeners don't know Heart Math Institute, get on Google and get acquainted, because their work is, I think, one of the most important on the planet. If you want to be with an animal in a way that they want to be with you, come from a place of invitation, of honoring, of respecting, of seeing their soul. That's why I believe animals respond to me in such a way that they do. When we acknowledge that individuality and the gifts that coming from a heart place with them makes, the life is very different, and the animal wants to connect with us. That's what I'm about, is animal interspecies connections.
Mm-hmm. And you've worked with not just domesticated animals, but with, I guess, what are commonly known as exotic animals as well. And some of them are not friendly.
Well, I want to tell you a couple of what I call profound interspecies connections.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was a 6-month-old bear that was separated from his mother during, the Mount St. Helens eruptions.
Oh, yes.
And Fish and Game there were a lot of animals, a lot of bears that were separated. And this one bear had been picked up, and he had the shakes. I mean, he had neurological damage to him. When he'd stand up, he'd shake all over. And somebody in their meeting had heard about my animal ambassador program, because I have a nonprofit organization called Animal Ambassadors that actually started in Russia. It's a whole other, when I was there. Anyway, they called me, and I happened to be that day in my office in Santa Fe. I think it was about 1986, maybe. And so I happened to pick up the phone, and they wanted to know, would we be interested in seeing if we could rehab this bear? Mm-hmm. So we said, yes, of course, and we paid to fly him down to Texas A&M University vet school, and they checked him out, and then turned him over to us, and we had one of our Animal Ambassador members at that time had a big kennel for a Great Dane, but the Great Dane had passed on, and she had this big doghouse in an enclosed area. So we brought him there on a hot Texas day, and actually an organization called Kids TV Express wanted to film us and this first interaction with this bear. And what I have to tell you about young bears, they're really friendly. They're not unfriendly. They're quite amazing. Yeah. Also polar bears. I mean, so
when they're young.
When they're young, yes, the babies. Right? Yeah. Because they're not afraid, so they have no reason to be aggressive. And I want to come back to that subject after, actually. And so he was in his house, and his, just in, like, looking at all of us. The kids were on the outside of the enclosure, and one of them was in with the camera. And so I just started, a little, not right directly in front of him, but a little bit to the side. I just came in, and I took a little piece of a rubber hose, and I just started doing TTouches on his paws at first. And he was just looking at me, totally unafraid. Did a few little circles. That's all, because he's little, moving the skin gently in 1 1/4 circles. Develops, it makes a cell-to-cell connection. And I'm asked often, well, okay, Linda, how come it is that you can work with so many different species? How do you know so much? I don't know so much, Jeffrey. I ask the keeper, I ask the vet, I ask the people who know these animals, what's your experience with them? And then I simply allow the animal to see me. And I'm very careful. I am never stupid, because it's really important that I also keep the animal in a place of non-fear, right? Okay.
So that's why you use the hose.
A little extension, not my actual hands. It was just a little short
the animal
piece.
Isn't being threatened by your proximity.
That's right. And I'm not facing him. I'm using my own language, like little to the side, so he can see me. Because if I face onward, that's like, he can't escape, right? So I always leave an escape route. That's basic good manners and good sense.
Well, I mean, like in a normal human communication, eye-to-eye contact is important, but I guess animals might be threatened by that.
Depending on the culture.
Every animal has a different culture.
Well, not just the animals, but also our culture around the world. It depends, that eye-to-eye thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't do that in every culture.
That's right, yeah.
So, anyway, so I just did a couple of minutes, and then I sat back and let him look around and think, because I wanted him to see us and to know we're not threatening. Okay. So then I go back after 3 or 4 minutes, and then I just took his paw, put my hand out, and he put his paw in my hand. And that was my intent. Can you please, can you put your paw in my hand? Okay, so he put this paw, and I do little tiny, what we call raccoon touches, because every different way we have of using our name is named after an animal I've worked with. So you know how raccoons have these little movements. So I did these little touches around his nails, and I just said to him, now, and you'd be very aware of your claws, be very calm, with your paws. So, and then I sat back again, and then there's pictures of me with my hands like under his little chin. He said, just working around the mouth, because working around the mouth actually affects the limbic system. It's the closest connection to the limbic system that affects our emotions. So I'm doing this little chin thing, and he's just looking at me like not more than 2 minutes, max. Sit back again. And then I sat back a little farther. And in those days, I didn't have glasses on, so I take my glasses off. No, I didn't. I didn't have glasses on, sorry. And I'm kneeling down, and he slowly comes out, and I was about 6 feet to the side of the entrance. Yeah. He came out, here's his little snout coming toward me. And just this slowly, he picked up my eyelashes, gently lifted this eyelid out, put it back this slowly. Just went like this with his little lips and snout, and went to the other side, lifted them out, put it back, slowly sat down, looked me straight in the eye, and then turned and walked over and sat in a tub of water, because it was really hot in Austin that day. Yeah. And it was that's what I call a profound interspecies connection. And people say to me, Linda, weren't you terrified? His intent, Jeffrey, was so clear that he meant no harm. And it was such a careful approach that it was like, one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. And that was his way of saying, we can trust each other, can't we?
Well, your work is largely about trust.
It is. It's about trust and honoring the individuality of that being. But also, it's this cell-to-cell connection, because in the mitochondria, in the nucleus of the cell, we're all one. We're all one.
In the nucleus of the cell.
In the center of the cell. The divine spark is in every cell in the body of everything on the planet.
Like the DNA.
It's the divine spark.
Okay. So, it might be at the quantum level.
Yes. Yes, at the quantum level. And it's interesting, I've been searching for these words that makes this connection. It's for me, it's the cell-to-cell connection. It's also the soul-to-soul connection, which is really interesting, because the way I developed this TTouch that makes this phenomenal interspecies connection was, first of all, my grandfather came to me with this form of Russian gypsy massage. Yes. And my husband and I wrote in 1965 the first book that we can find on massage and physical therapy for the athletic horse. He self-published it, and then it was a published book later. And so for 15 years, we did this form of massage from my grandfather. And it was very effective in helping our horses recover after hard physical endeavor. I did a lot of 100-mile endurance riding and horse shows and steeplechasing and all that stuff in my career. Anyway, it never affected the personality of the animal, however. And it was 1960 when I first heard about this concept of animal communication. And in those days, Beatriz Lyedecker was the first person I'd ever heard of who was very famous for animal communication. And she was pretty amazing because we had, one of my clients had a horse who'd had a fall on a jump and was lame. And they couldn't figure out the lameness. So no vet could figure out what was wrong. So I said, well, let me call Beatriz Lyedecker on the phone. So I called her, and she said, well, put the horse to the phone to the horse. I have no idea how we did it in those days. You don't have to do that anymore. But because you can do it with a picture or you know, parapsychology, right?
Well, telepathy.
Telepathy. So anyway, she said, well, you know what? That horse had a jump pole hit the horse in the shoulder. If you take it to the vets at Davis, tell them to go in 9 inches and told us exactly where to go, they will find a pocket of pus that is making that horse lame.
Oh.
And they did.
Oh, my.
That was pretty interesting.
That would have been an eye-opener.
And then another situation, I can't remember why I called her on this one. I mean, we're talking like many, many years ago, right? What was the, oh, I know. It was somebody who had bought a bull, a very expensive breeding bull, and he wasn't doing his job. He wasn't potent enough, he wasn't interested. It was a very strange deal. Yeah. So we thought, well, wait a minute, what's going on? You know, of course, they'd done all the vet things to check this bull, nothing. Okay, so I call her, and she said, you know what I see is that before they sold this bull, he was out in an area where he could see other animals, and it was really interesting, and there was a red dog that he connected to, but now he's kept in a dark place and he can't see anything and he's depressed. Oh. And that was the truth. And they changed the place and it made a difference. So that was pretty interesting, you know, after my grandfather's story. So over the years, if I have an issue with an animal, I ask somebody else if it's an animal close to me. If somebody comes to me wanting to connect, how does the animal feel? I use kinesiology. And I teach people to use their own body to get a yes and a no. And they can make a direct connection with the universe to ask about the animal, or they can ask the animal how they're feeling. But you have to be really careful about this because, you know, you have to be very respectful of this. And so it's, I just love this concept of how we can connect with our animals.
And you referred earlier to cell communication. When you do the touch, it's as if your cells at a cellular level are communicating with the animal.
Yes, and how I got to that concept, it was in 1976 in February. I was in the 4-year professional Feldenkrais training at the Humanistic Psychology Institute with Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais, and he had given us a number of books that we were to read and study. And one of the books was called Man on His Nature by Sir Charles Sherrington. And now, actually, on Amazon, you can actually get them for a reasonable price. A few years ago, it was like $136 for a copy. I still have my original.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in Movenpick restaurant in Stuttgart, Germany. I remember exactly where I was sitting. And I read a statement that said that every cell in the body knows its function within the body and its function within the universe. Now, I normally don't say that second part because it's hard enough to get the first part, right? Yeah. So I thought, wait a minute. It was after the first year of my Feldenkrais training with Moshe Feldenkrais, and we had watched him just make miraculous changes in a person that summer who had a stroke, and but we didn't yet know how to do this. And so when I read this statement by Sherrington, every cell in the body knows its function within the body, I thought, whoa, wait a minute. When I don't know how to do this amazing Feldenkrais work yet, all I have to do is say, cells, just talk to this body and remind their cells for their potential for ideal function. And that's how I started seeing the body as a collection of cells. And that's how I started connecting with animals in another way. And this question of trust that comes up. You see, we talked earlier about this dominance concept, that we have to dominate the animal.
Yes.
Until 1981, if a dog growled or bit, or a horse kicked or bit, punish it instantly, right?
Yep.
Of course, you have to dominate them, show them who's boss, as you said. But I read one statement in this year-long course in miracles that changed my life with animals. And the sentence was, aggression comes from a place of fear and is a cry for help. And when I read that, man, I thought of all, over the years. I mean, I was a really kind person compared to most with horses, but that was my business. You bite me, I'm going to whack you. Kick, I'm going to really whack you. And I thought, wait a minute, you know what? There's another way. If that is from fear, what am I doing? Just punishing that animal for that. How can I, wait a minute, step back and be with that horse or dog or even cat, whatever animal, in a way that I don't threaten them and they won't be fearful. And in that moment, I changed my approach completely. And I think this is so important, Jeffrey, in this day and age, because when we meet aggression with aggression, whether it's with an animal or an adult or a child, we're not acknowledging what's the core of it. And it doesn't mean, as my brilliant sister Robin Hood, who also teaches Tellington TTouch around the world, as she says, understanding behavior does not excuse it. How can we find a way to support that animal in coming from a place of trust rather than fear? And that's where this communication and this connection comes in.
Now, I have a sense that, deep within the brain, the fear instinct is in every person.
Totally.
That we're somewhere deep within us, we're like a little sparrow or something, like constantly on the alert for something that's going to jump out of the bushes at us.
No question. And that is important that we have that, actually. But when it's totally triggerable because we're in such a state of high anxiety because of listening to the news or reading all this stuff that's going on around the world, we're contributing to the problem and we're sure injuring ourselves. And this is, for me, this, what you say about the fear being in every cell, I've done a lot of past life regressions. Really important ones, actually. With Chris Griscom at her institute in Galisteo, and I did a session one day, and I saw within my own body that in every cell in our body we are carrying every emotion, every fear, hatred, jealousy, all the negative emotions that any person has ever had on this planet. It's part of our makeup. It's part of why we're here on the planet, is to make a decision that when we recognize that we can let go of fear, and it may not be our own, that we make a difference on the planet. And one of my favorite books over all these years has been Jerry Jampolsky's beautiful classic little book, Love is Letting Go of Fear. So after that session with Chris Griscom, we went for a walk in the bosque. I was in New Mexico. And, pardon me, I said, okay, Chris, so, as we recognize and learn how to release that fear by step learning how and we dare to trust, what's left? And of course, the answer is love. We leave space for love. And that's where, with the animals, we have to learn to give them boundaries, because if we don't create our own boundaries or create boundaries that are respectful, that are clear, that are kind, they don't know how to function in our
in our world. Yeah.
And so, I mean, one of the common things, I work a lot in animal shelters, all of our people do around the world. And one of the common things that dogs get sent back to in shelters are pulling on the leash because the person can't handle them, and barking, and or jumping up or being in a way that is not comfortable for the person. And that's where we've developed these different ways of working so that the owner can bring that animal in a kind, respectful way of being able to have these boundaries. It's like, for me, it's about communicating at another level. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you keep referring to every cell in the body, because as I think about the evolution of life, we all started out as single-celled creatures, even humans. That's how we begin our life. So there's a sense in which we are a composite of, I don't know, hundreds of billions of little animals inside of us.
Cells, yes. And I love this second co-authored book by Bruce Lipton. It's a funny title, but it'll come to me in a moment. It's, of course, Biology of Belief is his first one, and the honeymoon effect is the second, is the third one. But in the middle, he wrote a wonderful book called what the heck is it? Somebody should, I want your listeners to look it up.
I'll be flashing it on the screen.
Okay, you flash it on the screen. Yeah. Because it has a whole chapter on if we would just pay attention to this cooperation within our own body of our cells, we would have a different world. And we're walking miracles. The fact that we don't have to pay attention to our breathing or our blood flow or our lymph or all of this stuff, that's a miracle. But I began seeing this concept that, wait a minute, what runs all of this? What else can it be but divine? Nothing else. And I have to be really careful in my world, because a lot of people, they think that's religious, which means that then it's going to be discretionary. I mean, which religion are you, right? Yeah. No, it's way beyond that. It's way beyond that. It's recognizing this world we live in is a miracle, and each one of us and each one of that cellular connection, we're walking miracles. And that's how we work with the TTouch, and we work with animals, is acknowledging that potential, taking the animal beyond instinct. Yeah. This is why I don't use this concept of operant conditioning, because I think that's limiting their potential.
And you have worked with some animals. Well, let me. I know you've worked with some animals that are considered dangerous, but I recall, it's on YouTube, there's a woman who goes to the island, I think it's off of Japan, where the Komodo dragons live. These are man-eating reptiles. Yeah. And she comes up and hugs them. And I've often been just amazed, like, what does she find within herself that allows her to come and hug an animal that is known for eating humans?
Yeah, I don't know, because I wouldn't do it. And one of the reasons I wouldn't do it is that if I make a mistake and that animal reacts instinctively and hurts me, it's going to be punished. Or it's going to get a bad reputation. So I really recommend that people be very discerning and respectful of how we are with animals. So I'm really careful not to threaten them. And there's, oh my gosh, I wish I could remember her name. There is one beautiful experience and a YouTube of an animal communicator working with a Black Panther in South Africa. It's one of the most beautiful animal communications that I know of. And this panther's name was Devil, and he was really aggressive and unfriendly and afraid and withdrawn. And she just went in and talked with him. They changed his name, which I've been doing for many, many years, changed the name. And this animal, when she talked to him, he completely changed. And that's something that I have found that, I bought a horse once really cheap called Fighting Mad. He was a junior jumper. Mm-hmm. And they said, I got him so cheap because they said he bites and kicks and he doesn't like people. Mm-hmm. I took him home, put him on my own stable. I didn't tell any of my people what his real name was or that he had a problem. And I called him Jumping Jack. And from that day on, he was different.
Well, now that you mention it, one of the first dogs I ever had, I named Fang. And that dog bit my girlfriend, Judy Rabinowitz.
Oops.
At the time, I shouldn't have named the dog Fang.
That's right. And I don't understand why this is true. But, and I also like giving an animal a name that has a personality rather than the name of some mountain or something. I just think it's respectful. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. You see, in the past, animals have been really important to our physical survival.
Yes.
Dogs for herding, for watch dogs, for pulling, for all of this stuff.
Long before recorded history, we had these relationships.
We did. But, Jeffrey, today, I believe animals are just as important for our survival, but our spiritual survival. Mm-hmm. And this is what we see with people who have dogs and cats and bunnies and little critters, all the little creatures, mice. Something happens when we dare to open our hearts to them. Mm-hmm. And it's really a gift when we suddenly realize, wait a minute, people now, they're the mom and the dad of the animals. Mostly the dogs. You don't see it much with cats, but it's mostly with dogs, right? Yeah. Because that's how we feel, and that's really important. Mm-hmm. And there was a book called Starseed Transmission by, I think it was Ken Carey. Mm-hmm. And on page 11, I remembered that he said, before the fall of man since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, when we lost our ability to communicate with the animals, we've been disconnected from our source. Mm. And the animals give us that connection back to source. Mm-hmm. Now, when I tried to find it in his book, I couldn't find the exact quote, but I quoted that for years. Mm-hmm. And I think acknowledging whether it's a bird or it doesn't matter what this little being can be. Yeah. It's the geckos on our walls in Hawaii. I can feed them, and that connection takes us out of ourselves, acknowledging this other being.
Let me ask you this question. I think we have a certain affinity with other mammals and with other vertebrates, such as ourselves, but what about the invertebrates? They seem so different.
Cell to cell,
insects and snails.
Cell to cell, cell to cell. Uh-huh. It's really interesting when I see the beauty of divine spirit in every being. It makes a change in my consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I am sure that you must have by now read about the knowledge that trees have a whole communication system.
Yes, I have, yeah.
You've got to interview that author. I've ordered the book, and I haven't yet read it because I'm deep in this other book right now. But it's really important for us to understand these beautiful, it's not just animal communication, it's our communication with the trees and the butterflies and the bushes
and the rocks.
It's
as if a whole forest is a single organism.
Yes, and that's what's being shown. Mm-hmm. It's a brilliant world we live in, and it's interesting because living in Hawaii, we live in the suburbs of Keauhou on the Big Island, and I had never been dogless before, and so I said to my husband Roland, I can't get along without a dog in my life. Right? He said, "Oh, but he." When he had a ranch in Canada, he bred herding dogs, and so he's thinking. And we used to breed. My first husband and I bred Great Danes, so he's thinking of a dog.
Big dog.
Right? I said, no, and I just want a quarter of a dog. So we got a Westie, and she got to his heart very fast. And when she passed over, thanks to animal communication, I said to him about a year later, so what do you think Rainey did what did she bring to our lives? And he said, she made us a family. And for all those who don't have a partner and have a cat or a dog or a rabbit or another animal, it's our family. And that gives us a whole other connection and communication.
Yeah.
It's a really important, and when I think part of the gift of those animals is to teach us how to learn when they pass over, because they don't live as long as we'd like.
Right.
But it gives us a way of experiencing, wait a minute, just because they're not here in the physical, you can still bring them into your heart instead of shutting down and going to this place of fear because you can't see them. Acknowledge them. And I recommend so many books about that, because for us, I live in Hawaii, and the Hawaiian concept is we don't die, we simply change addresses. And so with our animals, with our friends, our families, if we recognize that, we know that, wait a minute, they're always there as a part of us. And I think that's one of the gifts of this connection or communication that goes beyond what we can see. And, I always recommend books. I have a huge, long list of books that have affected the Tellington TTouch development. And one of the latest is a book called The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. Which is really good.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, one of the reasons I recommend it so highly also when I first got it is it has a beautiful introduction by Dr. Raymond Moody.
Oh, yes.
And, his work, Life After Life, was life-changing for all of us.
Indeed, he brought the whole concept of near-death experience to the public awareness.
Exactly. And that's why I really, I paid attention to this book.
Yeah.
But I really recommend it. And another little book, I wish I could find copies and they would republish it. It was called Psychic Pets. I read it years ago. But for people who think their dogs are just gone or their animals are just gone, one of the little stories, it was full of stories, was a family who had, they lost their dog several months before. And they woke up in the middle of the night to the barking of that dog, and the house was on fire, and they got out.
Oh.
And that story just stuck with me.
This is a dog who had
died, gone over, crossed the Rainbow Bridge.
But from the other side, he saved them.
He saved them. Yeah.
That's a fabulous story.
And so I keep going back to heart math concept of actually, daring to bring our animals into our heart, to fully love, even though we've so-called lost. But what I say, well, your dog or cat can be with you wherever you go, or your bunny, or your gerbil, or your canary. They're not really gone. They're always here with us.
Well, Linda Tellington-Jones, once again, a delightful, profound, moving conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And thank you for being with us.